Hello and good evening, everybody, and I cannot believe that we are here, but we are now on episode 40 of Album Rant, and I just cannot say this enough, but I could not have done it without all of you fans and subscribers, and you all are what make this possible, and I just want to say once again, thank you. You are beyond appreciated. But tonight, what I am going to talk about is I am going to do my very first episode about American thrash metal band Megadeth. And I am going to be tackling their third studio release, released in 1988, entitled So Far, So Good, So What? But just to kind of give you an idea of how we got here in the first place, believe it or not, Megadeth, the artist of the focus of tonight's review, actually originated from one of my very favorite bands, Metallica, who I have been into ever since I was in 6th grade, all the way back in 1997, which is such a long time ago. But originally, the lineup of Metallica was James Hetfield on rhythm guitar and lead vocals, Lars Ulrich on the drums, Ron McGovney on the bass, and someone by the name of Dave Mustaine on lead guitar. Well, eventually, Ron McGovney, I want to say that's his name, I don't know. He was replaced with someone by the name of Cliff Burton, and so they then had the lineup of Hetfield, Ulrich, Mustaine, and Burton. And eventually, Hetfield and Ulrich said that they just had enough of Mustaine. They had some creative differences, not to mention he was heavily involved in substance abuse. So Mustaine was then given the boot and replaced with Kirk Hammett, who has been with the band ever since. But after giving the axe from Metallica, Dave Mustaine went and formed his own band, which was by the name of Megadeth. Now, that was not the original name of the band. I forget what the original title of the act was, but I do know this. Apparently, allegedly, Dave Mustaine was on a bus, and he read a pamphlet by some politician who was running for office, and it said, "The arsenal of Megadeth can't be rid no matter what the peace treaties do." And he was like, whoa, Megadeth, that sounds pretty cool. I think I'll name the band after that. And he did, and they became absolutely legendary. But initially, they put out a demo which included songs such as Last Rites, Love to Death, Skull Beneath the Skin, and Mechanics. And through that, they got the attention of a record company or a record label, and they eventually put out their very first album in the year 1985 entitled Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. And I gotta be honest, I own it. I got it it was actually a Christmas gift, back when I was in college, I believe. And I enjoy it. I like it. But something about it just didn't quite sit right with me. It sounded more like a demo tape, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it did have a very raw sound to it, but I don't know, the rhythm just wasn't quite digging. I wasn't quite digging it. And again, the songs I just don't think were that good, to be perfectly honest. But Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good did get the attention of another record company, Capitol Records, I believe. And in 1986, they released their second studio release entitled Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? And the sound on this one was definitely a lot different. It was a lot more crisp, a lot more polished, I guess, a lot more produced. And that may sound like a bad thing, but it actually wasn't. I mean, the sound was a lot more clear, and I still thought it did have the raw, thrash, aggressive feel that it should have, and I really, really love Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? I love the title track. That is definitely one of my favorite Megadeth songs ever. I do like Wake Up Dead and Devil's Island. Those are some great classic Megadeth tracks that came off of that second release. And I hope to talk about that one at some point. But anyways, they did kind of have a revolving door of band members. But by the time they got to their third studio release in 1988, which is what I'm going to be talking about tonight, the lineup was Dave Mustaine on guitar and lead vocals, David Ellefson on the bass guitar, Jeff Young on the guitar as well, and Chuck Behler on the drums. And this would be the only album that had that lineup, which is really kind of a shame, actually. But, you know, sometimes you just gotta take what you can get. But let's go ahead and see what we have on this. There is the cover, and ooh, I like it. So let's look over here. We have a photo of the band. There's Chuck Behler, there's Dave Ellefson, and Dave Ellefson would be with the band throughout the majority of their tenure, and he took kind of a break in the early 2000s, and I think he was recently let go due to some sexual misconduct from what I understand, but I don't want to jump to conclusions or anything, but that is what Wikipedia alleged. We have Jeff Young right there, and there's the big guy, Dave Mustaine. And while I'm on the subject, even though he never actually appeared on a studio album with Metallica, he does have a writing credit on 6 of their songs, and many of them are quite good, such as The Four Horsemen, Jump in the Fire, Phantom Lord, Metal Militia, Ride the Lightning, and The Call of Cthulhu, which is one of the greatest instrumentals ever. I mean, obviously, Burton, Ulrich, and Hetfield had a lot of contributions to that as well, but he does have a writing credit, I will say that. But let's go ahead and see what we have right here, and we start with side 1. Now, I want to kind of give you a history of my history with this album. Unfortunately, the very first time I bought this album back in 2005, I was just finally deciding that I liked Megadeth. I bought a Greatest Hits and Rust in Peace back when I was in high school, a freshman in high school, and I never really quite appreciated it at the time, and I kind of put it on the back burner for a very long time. But in college, I decided, yes, I like them. I'm going to get further into them. And I bought So Far, So Good, So What? But unfortunately, it was the remix version. And well, the remix version isn't very good. It has way too polished of a sound. It doesn't sound heavy. It doesn't sound like thrash metal, and I absolutely hate it. But anyways, when Into the Lungs of Hell first started, I was like, wow, this sounds like a pop song. What am I listening to? But this right here is the original mix, and this is the version you should be listening to, by the way. And Into the Lungs of Hell starts off, it's got a nice little guitar intro, but then it starts kicking in, and this thing is thrashing. It's about 2 minutes or so, but it absolutely kills. This thing is an absolute killer. It is very fast, and it's definite classic thrash metal. And for that, I do love Into the Lungs of Hell. It's really more of an intro to the album, so it really is kind of a guitar intro that kind of sets the stage, but boy does it set the stage well. And then we move into Set the World Afire. And this is the very first song that is not an instrumental. Now it starts off, and you can kind of hear someone in the background. It sounds, I don't know, it sounds like 1940s music or something. I don't know what it is, but it sounds like lounge music of all things. But that is really just giving you kind of a false sense of security, because after like 20 seconds or so, the band starts kicking in, and this thing is also very, very aggressive, and I also love it. Dave is killing it on the guitar and the lead vocals, and I do recommend Set the World Afire. Then we have a cover of Anarchy in the UK by the Sex Pistols. And from what I understand, some of the members of the Sex Pistols actually do make an appearance on this. I don't know that for a fact, but that is something that I heard through the grapevine. But it's a decent cover. I was never really that into the Sex Pistols. I have heard Anarchy in the UK many, many times, and I've never actually heard the Sex Pistols version, but I've heard this by Motley Crue, and I've heard it by Megadeth. And I gotta say, I think the Megadeth version is my favorite. And so, I mean, it's a decent cover and everything. It's really got more of a punk rock feel to it, but again, it's Megadeth playing. They put their own spin on it, and I really, really do love that. But, you know, this would be the last album, at least for a while, I think. But I know Rust in Peace did not have a cover, but this would be the last album for a while that had a cover on it. The first two did. This one does, so after this one, they kind of broke the trend of having a cover on every album, and I think that was probably for the best. Then we have Mary Jane, which is a little bit slower, a little bit doomier, and it's never quite been my favorite, but I still really do appreciate it. But I think Dave's vocals, I can't really describe it, but it's kind of slurry, I guess, if that makes sense or anything. It's kind of like, Mary J. I did that completely terribly. I didn't do it correctly. I can't do it, but I don't know. The vocals on this just aren't really hitting me as hard as maybe some of the other stuff. But my favorite from side one is definitely Set the World Afire. It is fast, it is hard-hitting, it is absolutely anthemic. I love it. I actually think side 2 is better. That is not typically the case with a vinyl, but it is in this one, and it kicks off swinging with 502. It's got a nice, again, the guitar kind of opens it up, and it goes, and then the band just starts kicking in, and this thing is very fast and very swinging, and I love it. I'm not exactly sure what it's about, but I'll say this. The very first line is, "Hey, shithead, pull over, it's the cops." I might have said that wrong, but it's something along those lines, and I really, really love it. I mean, it's nothing special. It's not going to make any top 10 songs of all time list, but I think it's a very solid and very, very underrated Megadeth track, and I love it. It's got a nice little interlude, actually. It doesn't last very long, but the band kind of slows down for a bit, but it's actually not very long. You hear a car crash, and then the band just starts kicking in once again, and it works very, very well. I think they were kind of going for kind of a sleazy feel on this one, and they succeed in doing that in just about every single way. But then we come to the song that most people remember this album for, In My Darkest Hour, and this was on that initial greatest hits that I bought, and it's good. Starts out with some acoustics, actually, but then, you know, of course, the band comes in, the lead guitar comes in, and it's slow, and it's doomy, and it works a lot better than Mary Jane does. And the very first time I heard this, believe it or not, I actually thought it sounded a lot like For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica. Now, Dave Mustaine, as far as I know, does not have a writing credit on that, but it does kind of sound like it, kind of that dun 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 dun. Again, that wasn't very good, but that's kind of the rhythm, as in my opinion. But it works very well. It's, again, a lot different than what came before and what comes after it. It's not fast, but it works very well. Doom thrash metal, I guess, if that's even a thing. I doubt it is. But then we come to Liar. Things start picking up once again with Liar, and I like it, okay? It's pretty short, actually. It's only about 3 minutes or so, but, yeah, I like the rhythm, I like the beat, I like the guitar work, and I think the song works very, very well. It's fast, and it's aggressive, and it's raw. I love it. And then it all ends with hook and mouth. Dun-dun-dun, 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 dun-dun-dun. That's the intro right there. And from what I understand, this song is about the PMRC, which was getting a lot of flack, a lot of well-deserved flack at the time, and just about every single artist at the time that was targeted by the PMRC and Tipper Gore was taking a shot at it, and Megadeth is no exception. But yeah, it's great. It is a classic Megadeth song, and I think it does deserve some more respect. But it works very well, and I like it. It's also very fast, very raw, and it's incredibly aggressive, and it's got a nice punch to it. And I think Hook and Mouth may actually be my favorite from side 2. Side 2, like I said, is a lot stronger than side 1. Both sides are great, but I think Hook and Mouth is actually my favorite. That doesn't happen very often. Usually they have, kind of the stronger song kick off both sides of the record, but I think the ending song is the best. So today I'm going to say my favorite from side 1 is Set the World Afire, and I am pretty set in that, actually. And from side 2, my favorite is going to be Hook and Mouth. Now, like I said, unfortunately, this lineup did not last particularly long. It only lasted for this album, and I think that is a real shame because I really do believe that this album is underrated. This is one of my favorite Megadeth albums ever. Now, regrettably, I have heard songs from their post-Rust in Peace stuff, and I gotta be honest, it was never really my cup of tea. So I've only actually heard the first 4 albums. So I can't say with absolute certainty that this is my favorite Megadeth album because I'm not knowledgeable about every Megadeth album. But I will say this. Out of the Megadeth albums that I've heard, I do believe that this one is my favorite. And many people do not rank this at the top, and I think that's a shame because I think it does deserve a lot more respect than it gets. I think this is a very, very strong thrash metal album. And Megadeth was considered to be one of the big 4 of thrash metal, alongside Metallica, ooh, that must have been awkward, Slayer, and Anthrax. And I'm not too much of a fan of Slayer and Anthrax, so I'm not going to say too much about them. But I do like Megadeth, and I love Metallica. Now, Dave Mustaine has been the only consistent member across every single album. David Ellefson has, been with the band through the majority of their tenure, but he recently left from what I understand. So Dave Mustaine is the only actual member who has been with the band ever since their inception. And just kind of a side bit of trivia, he has done some very charitable work, which I very much do respect, despite all his substance abuse problems. I want to say it was the Wounded Warrior program. I think he donated heavily to them, and that is a very, very worthy cause. And I think if you're trying to donate to a charity, that would be a great one to donate to. But kind of a fun bit of trivia. This was back in 2009, 2010-ish, I want to say. Dave Dave Mustaine apparently made some kind of big charitable contribution, and this caught the attention of Bill O'Reilly from the O'Reilly Factor, or the former O'Reilly Factor. And he got a little smug, and he kind of laughed about the fact that the lead singer of Megadeth was making some kind of big charitable contribution, as if Megadeth is not quote-unquote sophisticated music. He listens to sophisticated music, and Megadeth is just beneath him. So he was just in shock and awe that they would ever do anything of the sorts. And I think he felt a little offended that Megadeth was somehow close to the same level as he was. And I'm like, come on, Bill, you're better than this. But, you know, I do have to respect Dave Mustaine for that, and I think a lot of people should. Anyways, that is going to conclude tonight's episode of Album Rant. Next time, we're going to take a journey through some of the greatest hits, but until then, have a very pleasant evening.